Over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
And the manatees are contained within the order Sirenia. And so this term Sirenia is a reference to the mythical siren of home.
What can they teach us?
Their lungs, kind of, again, what these aquatic mammals is just so incredible. Like going back to
Hell yeah, their adaptations.
Yeah, they replace 90% of the air in their lungs.
Many species are in crisis and need your help. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
All right, welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
Hey, Angie, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today. This podcast is going to be amazing.
Yes, it's a really great one. And I know you were up in Michigan, but I'm sure it's probably good to be back in warm Florida. Nice, hot and humid.
Yeah, sweaty, humid, hot.
I miss it. For you, Angie can see me on webcam. I'm like I literally have 3 layers of coats on, and I have a blanket over my legs because it is so cold.
I'm gonna have to send you some polar fleece because
I need it.
It's all about the layers. If you have the right layers in cold climate, you're fine.
Oh, it sucks. I miss Florida, especially because these guys today, the Florida Manatee or the Manatee, the West Indian Manatee, the West African Manatee, everything Manatee today.
Everything Manatee today, and yeah, we get to talk about another species really near and dear to both of our hearts, especially you. You got to do some research and are doing research with them. And since I live in Florida, I luckily enough have been able to snorkel with them and see them a lot, and both in the wild and at a few different animal reservation preserve parks. So
right. Yeah, I know. I was gonna say Lowry Park, one of my favorite zoos in Florida by far. It's just an awesome zoo. Besides, the one there in Gainesville is my favorite, of course. But
good save, Chris. Good save.
Yes, yeah. But Lowry Park, they did a lot with manatee, saving manatees and bringing them in under human care and rehabilitating them and then re-releasing them. So they do quite a bit of work with. So shout out to them. I just love that place. It's just a great place.
Yeah, and just in general, shout out to the manatees, because if you're listening and you haven't looked at a photo or a Google image or a video of a manatee, any manatees, any of the main species, up close and personal, please do that now.
Yeah.
Just put this podcast on pause.
Yeah,
because
look at it.
They are the cutest roly-poly teddy bears of the sea or of the estuaries. I mean, they are just the cutest thing you've ever seen. And I know that I'm biased for many reasons. I'll admit that. Yeah. But even my 4-year-old, Xander, we recently saw one, and he was just in love. Like, he talks about it all the time.
Yeah, they're amazing. They are amazing. And, we're going to get to... Yeah, they are. We're going to get to their description here in a second, but just real quick, a couple things for us. If you haven't gone to iTunes, please go and provide a rating and review. We'll just keep begging, please. We really appreciate it. But the other announcement is we have a great interview on Thursday. Angie said, I have been involved with some research, and the lead researcher, Jonathan Cowart, I actually interviewed him the other day and talked about some of the work that he's doing. Because I'll be honest with you, he is one of a handful that understand manatee reproduction. There's not many of these experts around, and he's one of the few people that has dedicated his life to learning as much as he can. And so we'll talk a little bit about the research that we're doing, but Thursday we really get into it, and he's really great, well-spoken.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, I will touch on repro today, but I'm going to leave a lot of that up to the expert in the field right now in the state of Florida.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he is. I mean, by far. He knows more about it than, even as a committee member that we do. He's teaching us stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah, he's great. So let's talk sea cows, Angie, and stay tuned, because at the end we're going to talk about why the heck we would even call these sea cows.
Awesome.
But these manatees, they're known for being called sea cows. So these are one of my favorites not only because I'm doing research with them, but they're the closest relative to my favorite babies, the elephants.
Yes. I know, Chris. Yeah. Maybe it's because I was back in Michigan and now I'm refreshed back in Florida. And I could just be like in a really good mood today. I'm not sure, but with doing this research on the manatees, I found myself singing all day. I've been singing Jimmy Buffett all day. And so I know it seems a little different, like manatees and Jimmy Buffett, but if you stick with us long enough, I promise I'll sing you a little ditty, but I will also explain why Jimmy Buffett's been in my head and my heart all day, because it's, besides he's a fun, obviously, musical artist from Florida, but yeah, it's just, I'm in just a manatee kind of mood. It's just been fun.
Okay.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot.
Yeah, I guess Jimmy Buffett would put me in a manatee mood, the tropical sun, the islands, Florida, the Keys. Yeah, okay.
It's good stuff.
Okay.
It's just stick with me for the surprises at the end.
And then we always like to give a description before we really get rolling into it. And as Angie said, they're just cute, cuddly teddy bears. I think they look like a big sausage that just has front flippers and this round, flat tail. I
can see that, Chris.
Almost like,
yeah.
Take away the teeth, it looks like a naked mole rat. Mm-hmm. I mean, it does.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely. They're definitely rotund. There's no way, shape, or form of getting away from that. And they have the flippers, but their tail is so cool. It's like a huge circle. So it's not like a fluke, like flat a dolphin spin, or a flipper that tail flipper that like a whale would have. It's just this huge, round, flat like a pancake. So it's basically it's like a sausage and a pancake.
Yeah, breakfast. Yeah. So
with the cutest darn face you've ever seen.
They are. I mean, they are. Like, you look at naked bull rats, you're like, oh, you're the most hideous looking thing on earth, but you're so cute. Like, you just love them. Manatees, you can't really say they're ugly. They're just cute. They're just cute.
No, they have these cute eyes, and then their mouth with the prehensile lips, if you will. Yeah. We'll describe those a little bit better later on. And then they have whiskers on their face, and then actually distributed a little bit hairs throughout, small hairs throughout their body. And they're going to be a gray brown in color. Mm-hmm. And the newborns are typically born a darker color, but once they're about 1 month old, they lighten up into the typical gray or brown. A lot of times you'll see they have a little bit of algae built up on their skin too, crazy, so they can be shades of green. But they're big up close and personal. When the few times I've seen them, both obviously like in the wild, but then in aquariums, when they're right next to you, they can be like
10 feet long.
3 meters. 3 4 meters.
I mean, I read somewhere as big as 15 feet. And then they can weigh up to 1,200 pounds, like just huge. Or for their metric, 4.5 meters long or 550 kilograms. So they are not small by any stretch.
No.
They're big. They're big. And it's funny because, looking into this research, and we're going to get into some of the species and the dugong, the manatees versus dugongs. But these were some animals that people really, this gives the myth of mermaids, doesn't it? Like they were manatees or these dugongs that they thought, and that kind of gave them the idea that there was mermaids out in the ocean.
Oh yeah, Chris. In 1943, good old Columbus, who traveled.
1943.
Oh, sorry.
That wasn't too long ago. 7 years ago.
Okay, I've been on vacation a little too long. Time to get back to work, Angie. Yes. All right,
I think you meant 1493.
Yeah, a little dyslexia kicking in there. Yes. So let's try this again. In 1493, Columbus actually entered in his logbook a sighting of a mermaid in the Caribbean.
Oh. Okay.
So in the log, he also made side notes that the mermaid was not as beautiful as sailors had been led to believe.
I wouldn't think so.
And of course, we all know he had not actually seen a mermaid, but instead a manatee. And this log entry became the first written historical reference to the now greatly endangered West Indian manatee.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could see it. You're right. And so he probably was seeing the Antillean West Indian manatee.
Correct.
So if you look at the different species, and these are all Sirenians. So Siren, right? Siren, that's kind of where they...
Yes.
Yeah.
And the manatees are contained within the order Sirenia. And so this term Sirenia is a reference to the mythical Siren of Homer's Odysseys, which is a beautiful mermaid who, of course, lured sailors to treacherous waters and reefs. And all 3 species, is it 3 or 4 species?
Well, so you have the different species of manatee. So there are 3 species within the Sirenians. So you have the West Indian Manatee. And so Columbus probably saw the Antillean. And so that's the one that's basic, around the Caribbean islands, Mexico, the northern parts of South America.
Yeah.
Then you have the Florida manatee, which is the east coast of the United States, Florida, obviously, and then parts of the Gulf Coast. And then, so that's the West Indian manatee, those 2 subspecies.
The Florida and the Antillean are the subspecies of the West Indian. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's what we're really going to focus today. Now, you do have the Amazonian manatee that lives in the Amazonian River, or Amazon River. And then the West African manatee, which is on the west coast of Africa. So those are the main species of manatee. Now, within the Sirenians, there is this other species, the dugong.
Yes, Chris. I mean, I have to tell the truth. My mother raised me well.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just have mom brain, but I really don't know if I ever really knew what a dugong was new to me today.
Right. No, and it is.
Am I a bad person? Should I not be a zoologist? I don't know my marine mammals very well.
Because they're on my side of the earth right now, Angie. They're not, Europe, Africa,
Oh, thanks, buddy. You're a nice guy for not teasing me about it.
No, but I mean, honestly, the only reason I knew about them, really, it's one of these obscure species, is because of the research that we're doing. And then, we talked in Naked Mole Rats about Prof down in South Africa. Jonathan and I actually talked quite a bit about him because Jonathan went when I sent Danielle down there, I actually urged him to go with her, and he did, thank goodness. And they got to work with Prof down there. Prof has done some work in dugongs.
Okay, yeah. And of course, John, my husband, I was like, have you heard of dugongs? And he was like, oh, yeah. He was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, whatever.
We've got to find things to stump that chump because he is not easy to stump with this stuff.
And then he was going off on the evolution, and I was just like, well, do you want to be the guest evolution person today? Yeah. Or can you just give me the cliff notes, which he wouldn't give me the cliff notes. And so I just said, well, he's like, no, when you have a true parasodactyl or aerodactyl, I didn't say it right either. So I told him when we do cover hippos that since he specializes in even-toed, non-toed ungulates, that he could do the evolution in that. For me, he could sub for a few minutes and go over that.
That'd be cool.
Since
that'd
he thinks
be cool.
He's so darn smart. He is really smart. But
that would be cool. We'll have John as a guest speaker on the podcast. Yeah, that's pretty great. No, so the dugong is strictly in the ocean, in salt water.
Right, where the West Indian manatee, the one we'll be talking about today, is subtropical waters, but can withstand great changes in salinity. So they can be in the ocean or in the brackish, salty waters, but then also in the freshwater springs.
Yeah, and the West African too. I mean, they go back and forth, but this dugong does not. And the dugong, and I'm going to put a picture on the show notes for sure. It looks, they look a lot alike. The manatee, its mouth's a little bit different. So the mouth is a little bit more down. Their snout's pointed down. They have the flippers like the manatee, but their tails look like a dolphin or whale's fluke.
Yes, that's.
So it's bizarre.
It is. Bizarre. It's like a mismatch. Like put the pieces of the animal part puzzles. Yeah, it would be like a good game for my 1.5-year-old. And you wouldn't think that either one of these tails go. Yeah, it's interesting.
And it's like coevolution because these Syrians are not related to dolphins and whales at all.
Not at all. And that is one of the more fascinating things about, I think, this family is that the way they look, how they operate, how are they more closely related to some of the land mammals that we'll talk about if you stick with us here pretty soon than they are whales and dolphins. Yeah, it's just wacky.
It's crazy.
You gotta love you gotta love evolution for sure.
And even the pinnipeds, it's just they're just the earth is so amazing. Nature is so incredible. These animals are just incredible. So anyways, Angie, it's you have these aquatic mammals. They live in the coastal areas, mostly the tropics. And the dugong, I should say, it lives in the Indian Ocean. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have East Africa, parts of, Southwest Asia, the Middle East area, India, and then they're doing really well in Australia.
Oh, good.
The waters off Australia, Indonesia, things like that. Yeah.
So you might be able to see one while you're in New Zealand.
Yeah, they're not they're not down here because it's too dang cold. Yeah, I still got to see blue whale. That's my goal right now is to see a blue whale. So
it's good to have goals. Yes.
I will see a blue whale.
When in Rome, and that was always my mentality too. With being in Florida, moving from up north, especially being in where I'm located in North Central Florida, is you have to go see the manatees.
Yes.
I mean, how can you not? And it did take me probably about 2.5 or 3 years to finally do it, but I actually went with my sister, her husband, John, my husband, John, but then Anna, your other graduate student, lab mate. We probably skipped your lab, took the day off.
Is that where you were when I was looking for you both?
Yeah. It was a cold February day in Florida, which is not really that cold. And we put wetsuits on. And we, of course, in Florida, if you are going to swim with them, which is not really swimming with them. It's more just being in the water near them. You're not allowed to touch them. You have to stay a certain amount of feet away from them, and you have to go with a licensed operator. And we happened to go in Crystal River, Florida, which is a very popular area because the manatees, at least the West Indian, and I think most manatees, what they do is they don't have the extra layer of fat or blubber that a lot of mammals that a lot of the whales and dolphins have. So even though they are very rotund, in the winter months, they need to come into the warmer water. So when the water in the ocean they hang out in the shallow rivers, canals, salt bays, estuary, coastal reefs. But when that water gets colder, below 68, they don't like it. So they are animals after my own kind. They're like, heck no, get me out of here. So they migrate and they move inward into these rivers where the water's shallow and warmer, and that's where they'll spend a lot of the wintering months, like January, February, March. So February is a great time, and so you can go see them in these very shallow freshwater
springs.
But it was good. I was very skeptical, being a nature lover, and also I always want to make sure the animal is being respected and not exploited. And so and there's controversial reviews of should people be doing this, shouldn't they? Obviously, it generates a lot of income, and some of that goes back into their preservation and, of course, protecting the waterways. But the operation that we went with was obviously very licensed to the point and very, very thorough. We had to watch a half-an-hour video.
It's the whole thing with ecotourism. It's when it's done right, it benefits the community, because Crystal River, and I kayak there, and it's just, going to the springs, the springs are roped off, so there's places where boats can't go, people can't go, so the manatees have areas where they will not be bothered. And then, we were kayaking, and we had a mom and calf come right up to us. And it was just
they are very curious. Yeah. No, it's so cool. And they do limit the amount of people that go out per day in boats. So it wasn't even that crowded when we went. And obviously you're not allowed to touch them or seek them out. You just have to kind of float. And they don't really do anything. They just float. So, they'll go down into the water a little bit lower, and then they need to come up for air every 2 to 5 minutes. If they're not, unless they're being super active or grazing or something. Yeah. And then they come back up. And so I was smart enough to know their behavior, to know they would have to come up for air. So I would, instead of being right near where everyone was near it, I would kind of go off to the side by myself, and that's usually where they would come up for air, and so I could get a little bit closer, and obviously not touch them or anything, but have my intimate manatee time, and it was just incredible and life changing. Yeah, it was just a really incredible experience. Definitely on my bucket list, checked off. I'm really glad I skipped your class that day. And
I'm sure. Yeah,
no,
it wasn't you skipping a class. It was like, hey, I need your help in
I was gonna say definitely. I'm not a class skipper. It was more like, hey, we need to organize the lab, and I'm like, I'm out of here.
You're like, I'm out of here. Hey, Anna, let's go look at manatees. Well, and Jonathan and I get a little bit more into this on Thursday with the interview. So you want to listen to that. But as far as manatees coming into the winter, staying in these springs, one of the major things that causes mortality is not only just, human conflict, which Annie's going to talk about here in a second, but cold shock is a big one. So, Jonathan, to do his research, he has fortunately been able to do a lot of necropsies, for him to have access to material to study.
Just remind the listeners that a necropsy is
this is when the Fish and Wildlife, Florida Fish and Wildlife would find a dead manatee and they'd have to decide how it died.
Yeah, I always just think of it as as an animal autopsy.
It is.
I don't know why, but in the animal world we use necropsy or necropsy instead of autopsy.
Yeah. So it's trying to determine why the animal died, and Jonathan would go down there and collect reproductive organs and things like that so he could describe this stuff. But yeah, that's a big one. And then we get a little bit into the controversy and the politics on what's going on in Florida. So it kind of begs the question, why care about manatees? What are they doing for the environment? What are they doing for, the world?
For me, it's so easy. You should care about manatees because they are amazing. They are one of the only herbivorous, plant-eating marine mammals out there, besides like the dugong. And of course, for me, it's an easy answer because I've swam with them. I've seen them up close and personal. But with that being said, just recently, about a month or two ago, I brought my boys to the Crystal River area to a place called Homosassa Springs Wildlife State Park, which is awesome. It's of course in Homosassa Springs, Florida, and you can view manatees living in their natural environment. So it's in the springs, so it's not a captive setting. And the park is fun. They also have other native Florida wildlife that you can view as well. But the manatees just swim in. And then they have a dugout. My son Xander calls it a fishbowl. So it's basically like a floating platform out into a big open river area that's like crystal clear. And then they went ahead and basically went down and made like a glass bowl for lack of better terms, that the human goes into their environment, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see them up top from the floating platform, but then you can go down and they're grazing and swimming by you.
Oh my God. Why did I never do that?
I know, Chris. So I didn't, my sister, bless her heart, she's awesome. She was like, you have to bring Xander here. And I was like, oh, this is, just a small little park. I can see manatees anywhere. Why is this so special? And then I found out about the fishbowl. And Xander, this was a couple months ago, and he's still, once a week he brings up the manatee fishbowl and how he could see them and see how big they were and see what they were eating and then they pooped in front of us, which, if you're I don't care if you're 4 years old or my age. I won't say my age because I'm a lady. It's always cool. And I was like, oh, their poop totally looks like horse poop.
Oh God.
Because they're herbivores, right? So
yes, and you were swimming in that, by the way.
Well, it was the last time I saw him.
Yeah. Not that day.
So for me, it's the state of Florida. It's our official marine mammal, and it's so with tourists and the economy, I think there's no doubt why we should really keep restrictions going and keep protecting them in their environment, and also work very, very hard to protect the oceans and or estuaries, and of course these crystal clear rivers. Let's keep them crystal clear from all the pollutants and plastics. So, but I think historically they've kind of worked alongside mankind, because the West Indian Manatee, as I'm sure all the other species, they've been hunted for their meat, their hide, their bones.
Yeah, and then just stick with me for a minute, Angie. It's not the best story in the world, but how humans have impacted manatees coming up in evolution. So, I've got a story there. But before we get to that, I promise why I love these so much. And that is why they're like elephants. Now, you probably know the other species. So there's 3 species that are just so different, but they're all related, closely related. So you have the manatees, the elephants, and then, drum roll, Angie knows, the
Hyrax.
I know, this crazy rodent-looking badger. I don't even know what the rock hyrax is. It's just its own thing.
Is it an herbivore? I was thinking about this. Is how dorky I'm. Like, I was making the bed today, and I'm like, is the hyrax? Is it an herbivore? I couldn't remember.
Yeah. Yes. So they eat plants too. So that's something they all have in common.
Well, Chris, you'll have to put on the show notes a picture of all 3 of these closely related species, with a little side note that these 3 guys are all more closely related than a manatee is to a whale or a dolphin. Which is just bizarro.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you have the elephant, the largest terrestrial animal, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the manatee, an ocean-going mammal. And then you have this rodent thing, rock hyrax. And they're all super closely related. It's insane. And, one of the things I have, and I'll put this picture up again on the show notes, is the toenails of manatee. It looks like an elephant foot. It looks like an elephant foot. Yeah.
The front flippers, if you zoom in on it, they have 3 to 4 toenails.
Right.
Obviously, dolphins and whales don't have that.
Don't have that, yeah.
And so, it's very, very similar to an elephant. But then, I guess this begs the question for me: what does a hyrax have that's like those guys?
Okay, so mammary glands under the armpits.
Okay. Yep.
So up top, you think of cows. Some of the other ruminants, the even-toed ungulates, the udders are in the rear of the animal. These are all up front. Yeah, almost like primates. They're up front, the mammary glands. They replace their teeth like elephants. Okay. So their teeth they're not permanent molars like ours. They have a set of teeth that grow throughout their life. And then really what happens, I know, with elephants is when they get to old age, they've ran out of growing teeth. And so then they end up starving to death because they can't chew food, stuff like that. One of the other things that Jonathan and I talk about, and I'll save it for Thursday, but obviously we're looking at repro, internal testes.
Oh, right.
So the testes are inside, unlike most other mammals. So for thermoregulation, things like that. And then what Jonathan's looking specifically with Danielle, with the elephants, is sperm cell morphology. And that's highly conserved, through millions of years. And so they're looking at the ultrastructures and comparing things like mitochondria and all this other stuff. So we talk about it Thursday, but it's just fascinating. Fascinating that these
and I think it's another great example of convergent evolution, where basically a land animal, however millions of years ago, went from land into the ocean.
Right. Yeah. So that was my next question. So with looking at manatee evolution, so what came first? Was it the land animal going to water, or was it a water animal coming to land? Because if you think like basic biology, I always thought, the lizards came out of the oceans and, then they became terrestrial.
Right.
And so I thought, there must have been some water mammal that came up on land that developed into the elephant, right? I don't know. That's what I used to think. But you're unconvinced. Yeah, I'm looking at you. You're like, no, that's not right. You're right. It's not right.
Okay. Yeah, no. They went, the land animal went into
the water.
sea.
Yeah.
Which is,
that's the.
I feel like That's me. Like, if I had another 100 million years to evolve, like, I would go back into the sea.
You would end up being a mermaid? A real mermaid?
Yes.
Yes. So current theory has the manatees, distant relatives, going into the water. And they trace this back to a really primitive hoofed animal, condylarths, that lived. It lived along the seas like 60 million years ago. Like, just so long ago.
60 million. That's a long time.
Yes.
So that's another reason to care. Like, we don't want to screw up something that we don't want to terminate because of human activity. Terminate something that happened is 60 million years in the making.
That's why I cover this, Angie. This is why, not only is it fun, like, it's fun being dorky and thinking, history.
60 million years, like, what does that even look like? I mean, that's insane.
That's what makes me so sad for so many species, that it took nature so long, and we're wiping them out in a blink of an eye. But, anyways, the first Sirenian was found about 40 million years ago, and they found this fossil in Jamaica. So
cool.
Yeah, I know. Hey, Jamaica. And I describe this one as, it looks like a fat otter with 4 limbs. I mean, that's what it looks like to me, the picture that they have of it. And then if you go back, the first sea cows, about 25 million years ago, the fossils they're finding kind of look like modern manatees and dugongs. The streamlined bodies, the flippers, and the tail. Now, the dugong was kind of the ancient one, and then the manatee branched out about 15 million years ago. So you're talking a long, long time. Now, drum roll, my favorite part of the week, the largest sea cow ever is, you know this.
I do know this.
Okay, so it is the Stellard's sea cow. Mm-hmm. And usually when I do this, I say, I find the most ancient mammal I can find that was the biggest, right? Like we did the Syrian Camel, lived 100,000 years ago, size of an elephant. This one lived 300 years ago, or 260, 270 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
It hasn't been gone for that long.
No. And they got up to 30 feet or 9 meters.
That's crazy.
Weighed 10 tons.
I know. That's insane. I saw a picture of like a human next to one, and it's like a whale. I mean, it's like a human next to a whale.
Huge. And so it was first discovered in 1741 in the Bering Sea, and then within 30 years they were extinct. Like, I want to cry thinking about that.
I know.
Like, they find these wonderful, majestic beasts, and within 30 years between Russia and the U.S., that part of the world, they wiped them out. Just completely wiped them out quickly.
So 30 years, so quickly, yeah.
It's just horrible. It's horrible to think about.
Well, we're not going to let that happen again. We're not going to let that happen again. There's lots of people working really hard for at least the West Indian Manatee, but I think for some of the other species as well. So
yeah, there are a lot of conservation efforts. Now, manatees can live up to 50 years, right? I don't know if you found anything.
No, I think a lot of it's still a lot unknown, obviously in the wild, and so yeah, I think it's around 50, up to 70 potentially. Yeah,
pretty long. Males are bulls, females are cows. A group is called a herd, or do you know the other one? It's kind of a weird word.
No, I don't. I mean, I would have just gone with a herd. Aggregation.
Yeah, herd. Aggregation, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's so funny, all these different terms.
I like that one.
I would just call them a herd. Yeah, I would just call them a herd. Now, you were talking about the cold stress, and so, I looked a little bit into this.
Well, you did a lot of your PhD research on heat stress. So
right.
I figured, I'd leave the cold stress to you since it's somewhat similar, but in the other direction.
Yeah, well, it's really because they have these low metabolic rates. And so what that means is they produce less energy, I guess. Their muscles don't produce as much heat. They don't require as much oxygen. They don't need to eat as much, I guess, to provide the nutrients they need. So due to these low metabolic rates, they can't thermoregulate as well.
Well, and they don't have the blubber in the same way. I mean, obviously they have some, but they don't have it in the same way that a male or a dolphin will.
Yeah, and and whales, dolphins, and even pinnipeds, are seals, walruses. They eat fish. They eat, they're kind of maybe omnivores or carnivore diets.
A higher fat diet,
right?
Yes,
so
definitely.
They're getting some more nutrients, whereas this is completely herbivore. So again, cold stress is the enemy for them. Just in 2010 in Florida, 246 died, due to cold stress. So, and John, it's interesting, Jonathan, just give you kind of a heads up. The power plants in Florida, which this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of the power plants that are near the oceans, the manatees have come to learn to depend on them to stay warm.
Sure, yeah, that's where I've seen them outside of Fort Myers at a power plant there, and the power plants, of course, kick out some of their warm or hot water, and then then recirculate cool water to cool off some of the generators or whatever it is that they do. And the manatees hang out there, and they have historically for years. So the question is, if these power plants go away someday, which
they're starting to,
energy solutions they might, then what are these guys going to do that have been the moms have bringing their calves there, so now the calves have learned to go there. Their repeat customers will come back to the same spot the next year, and they are very well protected. I mean, the different cities will rope things off and make sure that no boats or pedestrians or anything can bother them. So they are very protected in those areas, but it's just how once again when humans interfere with Mother Nature, it's tough.
Yeah, that was kind of the point I was making. Is that, these animals adapting, to human intervention, and then all of a sudden, bam, we take that away from them. How's that going to affect the manatee population? And I'm sure there's going to be, once those happened, some die off, which is sad. Is sad. Some other just factoids, they can hold their breath up for 20 minutes, but, every 3 to 4 minutes they come up and take a breath normally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, their lungs kind of, again, what these aquatic mammals is just so incredible, like going back to blue whales.
Their adaptations.
Yeah, they replace 90% of the air in their lungs, and we only replace 10% of the air in our lungs when we breathe, which is crazy.
Well, and these lungs, too, they help regulate their buoyancy. And they extend the length of their body, which helps control their position.
Now, you did say that, they eat grass, they're herbivores, these floating or shoreline or submerged plants. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, they can graze on up to 60 different species of aquatic plants or seagrasses, is the way that I like to think of them, in both the fresh and salt water. So, and the manatees, they have that split upper lip. It's like prehensile, which helps them grab food. And some researchers say that it's similar to an elephant trunk, but obviously way shrunk down, if you think about it. Right, yeah. But interestingly enough, too, I know they're called sea cows, but they don't always live in the sea, and they definitely aren't like a cow in their nutrition.
No.
Except for they do eat grass, so manatees are non-ruminants. And they're hind gut fermenters, similar to the horse, so that they have a long colon for digestion. But unlike the horse, their digestion takes a lot longer, probably because of the slow metabolic rate, and also to extract as many nutrients from these grasses as possible, because it takes 148 hours for food to pass through their digestive tract.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I'll tell you what, for me and my friend Taylor and Jesse, I'm glad that we do not have to do digestive trials. Studies on these guys. Yeah. Oh, man, we could be there.
It's a lot of,
we could be there for weeks, right?
I know.
Yeah, so.
Collecting lots of poop.
Yeah, but then waiting that first 148 hours for like the marker to go through or to figure out what's going on. So, the other thing, and they'll also, interestingly enough, use those front flippers, which have finger bones in them too. I don't know if we've pointed that out yet. So it's almost like if you took your hand and just put all the fingers together, like you.
Right. With the fingernails and everything. Yeah.
But they use that to dig up roots. And then they can also, they use the flippers to steer while they're swimming, but they can also help manipulate food in their mouth, which makes them even more adorable. Because a lot of times they'll feed them lettuce, like in the aquariums, and they just are like putting this like lettuce in their mouth, and it's just uber precious. Now there are reports, of course, they're an herbivore or a marine mammal, but there are reports that they can eat invertebrates and fish in both the wild and living under human care. So I don't know how often that is or what sparks that behavior. And as I'm sure you point out in your interview with Jonathan, or Jonathan points out, is we still don't, there's so much we don't know about them.
Oh yeah. There's a lot we don't know. It's one of the few mammals that have people like Jonathan studying them. They do, and I did read they eat up to like 10% of their body weight a day.
Yeah,
like 100
which can be
50 kilograms.
So which can be over 100 kilograms, which that's kind of like you. Like they eat you and lettuce. Like if you were.
Oh, I was like, I don't eat that much a day.
Yeah, but if you were basically just a giant lettuce, that's like what they would eat all day. Pretty funny, huh?
Right. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we're like you.
And so, in pop quiz, Chris, how many hours a day do you think they graze on these seagrasses?
Oh gosh, if they're eating that much, I would imagine. I imagine they're 70% of the day. Probably just like another herbivore.
It's a little on the higher. You went a little over for Price is Right rules.
60%.
6 to 8 hours a day. So that's going to be about
50%.
No,
no, less than that.
30.
We suck at math.
That's going to be about 33%, I think.
30%. Yeah. We're not good at maths, Angie. With the S.
I can be. I'm a little slow. It's a dyslexia kicking in.
Yeah. And then being this animal that goes from fresh to brackish to ocean water, what do they drink? Like, how do they filter, right? That's a question I have.
Yeah, me too. And from what I can find, that they do require water, and obviously they prefer fresh water from the springs and the rivers when they're in them. But then when they're in the oceans, they do have to consume water.
Yeah, so that was I ran down this rabbit hole a little bit, and and I always assumed it was the kidneys. That's just basic physiology. The kidneys filter. I mean, the liver filters a lot of stuff for us too, but the kidneys are really, especially with salt, is really important. And so, kind of looking into this and some of the studies that they're doing. So the dugong is a strictly marine saltwater Syrian. So they have evolved to live, drink, eat, everything like that. The manatee, since it goes back and forth, it really has a specialized kidney. And this researcher it's Dr. Malef out of Ohio, he has found that the manatee kidneys, and I'm just reading this direct quote, has an astounding ability to concentrate the urine, which helps retain fresh water, to at least 1,160 millimoles per liter, and salt water is about 1,000 millimoles per liter of salt. So, anyways, to sum that up, what he's saying is their kidneys are so specialized that their urine is like highly, highly full of salt, that they filter it out, right? And they retain some of the fresh water. So, also, when you're in the water, their urine was floating by. That was lots of salt in there, Angie. Keep your mouth closed.
And Chris, don't tell anybody, but mine was too. Yeah. Okay, whatever. The small little amount that was actually able to seep out of that wetsuit.
Hey, warms it up, right?
Exactly. That water was cold for me.
Especially in February.
Cold for me.
Oh. So, some of the behaviors of repro, I've got some things for you, but I wanted to see what you found.
Sure. So the way that I think a lot about their movement. So that's what I've observed, just sitting there for hours in my cold pea-soaked wetsuit. And then, of course, seeing them in the fishbowl at Homosassa Springs, and then, of course, just in the wild in general. But their activity is awesome. I think the way that they move and they propel through water is they can swim up to 20 miles an hour in short bursts. Yeah, and I just think of them as like the sloth of the sea. Like they're not that slow, But when they move, it's like a dolphin, but in slow motion. And they're going to be active at both day and night, and they rest for a long time. But of course, when they're resting, they have to come up for air every few minutes. And they are really agile, though. For I know you describe them as a sausage. I call them them rotund, roly-poly teddy bears. They are really agile, and they can do complex maneuvers, somersaults, rolls, swimming upside down, barrel rolls, body surfing. They play with each other. And, for a 1,000 or 1,200 pound animal to do this, it's pretty interesting and fun to watch too. So, but they are largely solitary, except for a lot of times they'll form these loose aggregations, like you said, when they're together. And that's usually in the wintertime where they're kind of coveting or trying to find these warmer areas. You'll also see them, if you see a group of them together, it might actually be a breeding group where it's one female being chased by 20 males.
Oh, it's crazy. That was what I was going to bring up, because when Jonathan, in his early stages of his research, he, taught us, and I didn't know this, all about what we knew about the manatees, which again wasn't very much, but they get in these mating herds, and it's this one female being chased by all these males, and they come and try to mate, and I think multiple males mate with one female.
Yeah, they're definitely polyandrous. The female will breed with multiple males and different males each season.
Yeah, and it was Jonathan wanted to, it was amazing, and I loved his ideas, but he wanted to know, okay, here's my question. How do the males know she's in heat? And how do they know where she's at? Right? It's a big ocean.
It's a big ocean, and they live solitary, and they don't form pair bonds. So technically, each time it's time to breed, they have to find out where she is. And not only does the one male find her, 20 males.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not one; it's a bunch. And so we were thinking, is it? I thought maybe behavior, maybe there's some infrasound that she's doing to let them hone in on her. Then we talked about maybe pheromones, but then how do pheromones work in an ocean? How well can they smell? It was, and then for him to design a project around that was
science. Yay!
Yeah, but it would take years and years and years to answer that question.
Well, what they do know is that at this point, researchers don't believe that they use any echolocation, but they don't have vocal cords. But they do use various forms of communication in the water. They make noises like chirping, whistles, squeaks. Researchers believe that's probably produced by the larynx. And they'll do these sounds when they're frightened, sexually aroused, interacting with each other. And of course, these vocalizations are a very integral part of the cow-calf or the mom-baby relationship. And researchers have reported too that the individuals will rub themselves against hard surfaces, so they think that might secrete scent information about the reproductive status of the females. And then also, manatees are known to sometimes eat poop on their others' defecation, and they're wondering if that might be a behavior too to test the. Since, like you said, maybe the pheromones can't get through the water, but maybe estrogens. We know estrogens definitely released in the poop, right? We can test an animal's estrus cycle from the poop. So it's so they don't know. You're right. They definitely don't know. But
he wanted to answer that question, but it would cost millions of dollars. And
hopefully he'll get a postdoc in that.
Thousands and thousands of hours.
I know, but it would
be cool.
Well, it's an important question too, as these numbers are dwindling. Is how do we help keep population stable? Where are they coming to breed? How do they find each other? So, but if you'll bear with me, I have a little clip of their vocalizations.
Now that it's almost like dolphins, the dolphin squeaks and stuff. None of the clicks though, right? The Amazon River dolphins click, But
yeah, it's more like it's really neat. It's just it's like chirps and whistles, and usually when a newborn calf, right after it's born, it will do these chirps or whistles, and they think it's to help start forming the pair bond.
Right.
And
the pictures with the moms and the babes, it's just the best.
It's so sweet.
Yeah,
so sweet. I mean, like I said, we'll put some photos up on the show notes, but man, if you haven't ever, or just YouTube manatee videos, because they're mom and calf manatee.
No, it's amazing that, the moms and the babes, but, when do they wean, I guess, is my question. And,
sure.
I mean, they do have long lives. I mean, 50 years is a long time.
Oh, yeah, Chris. I mean, they have a really, really long lives for a general animal like us, basically. But, the female, she's going to have, her gestation period is going to be 12 to 14 months. She'll typically produce only one calf. Now, one of the problems, or one of the reasons why there's such a threat for becoming extinct, is because their interbirth interval is only 3 to 5 years. So they don't have. It's not like they have a calf every year.
It's on a high term.
Not even close. And the calves are going to start consuming plants a few weeks after they give birth, but they're dependent on their moms for about 2 years. And the mother-young pair is very stable and long-term. So this week, again, we keep featuring all these super moms.
Right.
It'll definitely...
Well, every mom's a super mom.
Every
mostly,
mom, thank you. That is true.
Until we do seahorses. We will do seahorses soon. That has been on... I know we haven't brought that up. That is on our short list at some point.
That is a super dad.
I know, and it's almost Father's Day. I wanted to do it during Father's Day,
that's actually a good idea. Maybe we
but
do
it's
that.
a little. Yeah, we'll talk off air. But anyways, seahorses. We have to do seahorses.
Yeah,
but
no,
yes,
and
most are super mom.
But super parents. But the manatee is once again a super mom, and they think that the mother and calf, they basically have this long parental care time, because it probably aids in the transfer of information about migration routes and other really important learned information. But once this calf grows up, whether it's a male or female, it is going to go off on its own and be solitary for the most part until it's breeding time. And now, Chris, in a male, here's another situation that adds to their potential ability to become extinct, is the fact that a male is not going to reach full reproductive maturity until he's about 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
Now they technically have the quote unquote ability to reproduce or breed as early as 2, but just in general, their reproductive rates are low. And so that's they're
not going to compete with the bigger males either in those breeding herds.
Yeah. And then, of course, all these bulls are then going to pursue this one receptive female. We don't know how she's receptive or why, right? That's what Jonathan wanted to study. But so then he's competing with like 20 other dudes, So I mean, to spread his genetics. So it can be a little tough. And now on the female side of things, female reproduction tends to kick in at about 4 to 5 years of age. However, a cow's typically not going to be successfully bred until she's 7 to 9. So once again, I mean, we're talking up to 10 years that they have to not get...
And then only have a calf every 3 to 5,
right? So their generation interval is pretty slow. And that's one of the reasons why it's hard for them to rebound, even with all the protections that, of course, I know the state of Florida and the United States in general, and of course other countries have put into place.
I mean, that kind of leads into conservation status, and with less than 10,000 West Indian manatees, about 2,300 Florida. That's what I found?
Sure.
IUCN?
Yeah, less than 25 mature individuals in Florida.
2,500, right? Yeah.
2,500, and the population's estimated to decline by at least 20% over the next 2 generations, or about 40 years, due to anticipations with changes in their migration and warm weather habitats. And then, of course, one of the biggest problems is boat traffic.
Yeah, and especially as Florida grows and grows and grows, and more and more people.
So the IUCN, the International Union of Conservation Nature, does declare the West Indian Manatee as vulnerable. Mm-hmm. But more recently, in the past 30 years or so, maybe even longer than that, the manatee in the U.S. has been on the endangered UF federal list for the Fish and Wildlife Services. However, with this current administration, I'll just let my tone do my talking.
Yes.
About a year ago, the U.S. Secretary of Interior, Ryan Zinke, announced the federal reclassification of the manatee from endangered to threatened.
Right. So they lose those protections, yeah.
I mean, people are still fighting
right?
for it. Yeah, and I don't know if it's lost its protections, but there's a bill. Yes, it's.
Well, it's interesting. Jonathan and I kind of get into this a little bit, and we can kind of save the politics for Thursday's talk. You know, looking at
yeah, I'm into
lightening some of the
tonight.
I know, lightening the regulations, and you got tourists who don't care about manatees. They want to go super fast in their boats. And they hate these no wake zones and things like that. So Jonathan and I kind of talk about that, especially because he has dealt with a lot of, necropsies. And so I talk, what's the main cause? Is it boat strikes? Is it, drowning? Is it, cold stress? So yeah, it's the regulations are in there for a reason, and less regulation, especially, in our national parks, our wildlife. It's just, come on.
So in Florida alone, 85% of the manatees show horrible scars caused by boat propellers, and over 130 a year die in Florida.
Yeah, and that's how they identify them is by the scars. That's how they ID the animals. What boat scars do they have, and then they know which animal's which. So,
yeah, and so, I mean, that's the threats. Obviously, it's human-induced for the most part because they don't really have any natural predators.
No, none.
What I was reading is if and when manatees and alligators cross paths here in Florida, the alligator looks the other way.
Yeah, it's like that manatee's gonna crush.
I mean, the manatee is like the most gentlest creature ever. It wouldn't even. I mean, it could never do anything. But it's obviously its size is pretty intimidating, and probably its shape and all of that. So yeah, I mean, but they're also a threat due to agricultural and industrial runoff to their waterways, so water pollution, and a lot of times these pollutants can accumulate inside the manatees and become toxic.
Yeah, that's the West Indian. The West African, they're vulnerable, less than 10,000. Yeah, I was reading some stuff that, like, even the manatees get into the rice fields, so they're kind of seen as a pest. So, again, you have human-wildlife conflict there.
Oh,
the dugong, which has a huge territory. I mean, the Indian Ocean from Africa to Australia is enormous, and all the coastal areas. There's less than 10,000. So, across the board. Okay. It's another endangered species to keep our eyes on.
Yeah.
Now,
well, and there's tons of conservation actions being taken place.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like who's doing the work, Angie? Who's out there fighting the fight?
Yes. Well, this is why I don't know if I should do my singing now or later.
Yes.
But
yeah.
So this is what made me happy. Interestingly enough, a lot of times in preparation for preparing for the podcast, I'll look into some of the conservation groups or zoological parks or researchers, universities that are working hard to protect these animals in the wild places. And interestingly enough, one of the main ones that I found for the manatee is called Save the Manatee Club. And they can be found at www.savethemanatee.org. They also have a great Facebook presence. So I was really excited, and I clicked on the page, and I started reading about it, besides the fact that they have won tons of conservation awards for being what I call like a clear and translucent charity. And the fact that, like Charity Navigator, I always look at how high the organization is rated, and this one is like rated the highest.
Super high.
Just people love it. They give as much money, like most of their money, directly back to protecting the animals and the wild places they live. So interestingly enough, the Save the Manatee Club, it was established in 1981 by none the other Jimmy Buffett.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Right?
Like, Mr. Florida, yeah.
And then also former U.S. Senator Bob Graham when he was a governor of Florida. So you get the music guy, the Margaritaville guy, and the politician guy coming together, okay, for a good cause 30 some odd years ago to make this nonprofit Manatee Club with the goal to basically protect manatees in their aquatic habitats for future generations by aiding the recovery and protection of manatees and the water they live in, not only here in Florida, but throughout the world. And I just got super excited because, once again, I always believe that these people that have star power or macro influencers should give back, right? And I know they do,
right.
But I always like it when they give back to endangered animals, right? That's kind of my jam. And so when I found out Jimmy Buffett, I was just super excited, and I put Jimmy Buffett on and jammed out to him all day. And I don't know about you, Chris. I don't know if you're a fan or you're not a fan.
I love Jimmy Buffett.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love Jimmy Buffett, of course, all the sing-along songs, but I am a huge fan of old school Jimmy Buffett, which is there's a record called A1A, which is a road in Florida. If you haven't checked it out, I highly, it's very, very different than Margaritaville. It's singer-songwriter. One of my favorite songs ever, one of the first songs I ever learned to play on guitar is called A Pirate Looks at 40. And it begins with Mother, Mother Ocean, I have heard you call. And so me being a water person, I've just always loved that song. And so anyways, this group is doing such amazing stuff. They sponsor research, rescue, rehabilitation, and release efforts. The Save the Manatee Club will take legal action when appropriate, and they demand accountability by policymakers, right? Because obviously a policymaker helped found it, right? So they do get into politics when necessary. And they are huge into science, and they assist scientists and educators in the Caribbean, South America, West Africa. And, of course, as scientists, I love them because they use science to help make science-based decisions to support science-driven policies. Bada bing, bada boom, that's how you change the world, folks, all right? And,
yeah,
and this group is doing that. And if you have interest in Jimmy Buffett and manatees, like two of the greatest things ever. Oh my God, I'm like so Florida. I used to be like blueberries
girl,
and like Bob Seger or Eminem or Madonna's from Michigan.
Oh God, yeah.
I am not a Kid Rock
Michigan,
fan. I will say that, like whatever. Anyways, I'm a Florida girl, but if you do want to help out Save the Manatee Club, of course, their website's gorgeous. You can adopt manatees. They have tons of merchandise you can shop at. You can donate, and they also have a great outline of how to actually act just by contacting your policymakers in your area and letting them know that manatees are important to you. And they have like a template and a platform of how to do that. So towards the end of the song of Margaritaville, Jimmy Buffett sings, "I blew out my flip-flop, stepped on a pop-top. Cut my heel, had to cruise on back home." Okay, so I'll try singing it, and maybe that'll sound better. You got that? So, and towards the end of the song, in one of the verses, he says, "I blew out my flip-flop, stepped on a pop-top, cut my heel, had to cruise on back home." So, John was singing that, and I realized he stepped on a Pop-Tart. Like the cereal, like the cereal bar thing from Kellogg's that you eat. And I paused the song and I just started laughing hysterically. I'm like, "What are you singing?" He's like, And I'm like, "He blew out his flip-flop because he stepped on what?" And John
Pop-Tart.
says, "Pop-Tart." And I just started laughing hysterically. And he didn't believe, for 20 years, Chris had thought that it was Pop-Tart. And had
those damn Pop-Tarts.
I know. And I'm like, how would a Pop-Tart cut your heel? I don't understand. How is that even a thing? Anyways, we got in this huge thing about it. And I was right because, of course, thank God for Google, right? What did we do before we had Google? Yeah. And he had to eat crow, and it was really funny. And to this day, whenever that song comes on, I just crack up. And
don't step on Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, and he still claims that in Massachusetts they don't say pop, they say soda. So pop-top isn't a thing. Yeah. But anyways, it's funny. So I just love Jimmy Buffett, and And talking about manatees and Jimmy Buffett make me a happy person. It makes
my mom-in-law loves Jimmy Buffett, and I had high school 4th row Jimmy Buffett in San Diego.
Nice. He's on my bucket list. I've heard it's some of the most. My sister's been to like every concert, and she says it's the most fun she's ever had. Because of the crowd, right? So, I definitely got to go.
I love Jimmy Buffett's awesome. So, conservation tips, again, each thing, if we keep building upon this. So, if you're listening to this, please make this commitment to us at the show and then to you. I want you to commit to buying your own straw. We are fighting the fight to eliminate single-use plastics. I will go buy straws for the family today. I have been meaning to do it. I'm making this commitment today. I've got to go to the store anyways and get groceries for the week. I am buying reusable straws. And Angie brought up a great organization earlier that we're going to link again to the show notes, that you can buy your own straw that you carry in your purse or right around the keychain.
It's like a keychain. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, and the straw folds right out of it. So you always have it with you, and it's really easy to clean.
Yeah.
And if Chris puts a link up there, you definitely have to get one. I love mine. And the other one, too, it's another step, another level, is carrying your own cutlery or silverware.
We'll get there. We'll get there on that one.
I got English for a second. Silverware. If you can have some of your own in your purse, depending on how big your purse is. I have a very big purse with endless crazy pockets.
That's true. Some plastic or something in a bag that, that.
Yeah, and if you're not that committed, I feel you. I forget mine sometimes, but if anything, just whenever I get to go, I just say no silverware, no napkins. Like I'm gonna eat it at home, right? I don't need that extra stuff, that extra junk.
Yeah, then we just need to keep working on it. So please make a commitment to buy your own straws. I'm going to do that. And again, we just take these little steps. There's thousands of us now out there listening. So, when we get up to millions with Angie and I, we'll be making a big difference for the planet, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So anyways, we talked about, so the question is, why are manatees called sea cows? And it's just a funny nickname that has persisted through the centuries. It's because they're not cows at all. They're not even related. And as Angie said, they're hindgut fermenters. They don't even have ruminants like cows. But because I guess, you talked a little bit about their slow motion.
Very slow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that they just go around grazing slowly. So they've kind of come up with this moniker that they are sea cows. And it's just stuck. And it just
love it.
Makes sense. Yeah, it just makes sense. They're slow cows of the water that just go around and just eating these grasses. So there you go. So sea cows, mermaids, sirens, whatever you want to call them.
Roly-poly teddy bears. I want to smooch their face, but I know I won't.
Right.
It's illegal to touch them.
Yeah, don't touch them. So thank you. Subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't. And, one of the things I'm going to try to remember to put up Facebook. Please remind me if I don't, because I say this stuff and sometimes I don't do it. What's your favorite episode and why? Some feedback for Angie and us. Why did you like that episode? What did you like about it? Where could we improve? That's always, constructive criticism is always welcome.
You mean where can Chris improve?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Angie. The thing is, you got to listen to the news. Jesse and I are really hammering on you, making fun of you.
Good.
So, anyways, no. It would be cool to have you and Jesse do a news segment without me and see how that goes. But anyways, another great episode, Ange.
Thanks, Chris. I had a lot of fun. I'm still singing Jimmy Buffett as we fade out, man.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.